take them down and take them down and take them down, take them down, take them down and take them down and take them down. As you look, the whole room explodes down and as you look, the whole room explode down and
Okay, so no lunch for you today. I can take all the time in the world. This is me, J Baruch, at every place. Developer advocate at JFrog. Usually it takes me like 5 minutes to explain what is this, but we had already here on stage one for Google, so I'm good. A little bit tight on schedule. We have 25 minutes, 125 slides, 30 memes. Should be fun. We are going to talk about modules, and here is something from a package from Wikipedia. You don't want to read it. But the question is, so it was modules and now it packages. What's the difference? Modules are more API and development oriented, while packages are about installable and runtime like modules. But for the sake of this talk, we just don't care. I will use them interchangeably, whatever. Modules everywhere. So we have them on a system level. You can see here some that you know, some that you don't know. Those you should know for sure. You have those modules on the development level. So again, long list, some of them more familiar. You should know those at least. Maybe the CocoaPod is new for Objective-C. All the rest should be familiar. A lot of pluggable frameworks with all those plugins and modules on the framework levels. Again, Ruby on Rails and Grails and jQuery, Node.js, all this stuff. And of course, any pluggable application. So now you create your own application, you want to allow plugins, those plugins are modules, you are in hell. So what? Well, I'm going to tell you a number of stories, dragon stories, frightening stories, and we'll see what are the bottom line of every one of them. Let's start with story number one, story of indexes kept in the wrong place. So once upon a time, the computers were very big and very slow. And actually, they couldn't really serve runtime searches. But not anymore. Today, we have pretty good computing power in pretty good small packages. And some companies actually manage to serve real-time searches, right? We don't need to download the index to search Google. But if we use Java and we use Maven, we still need to download indexes for search, let's say, inside Eclipse. So we have Eclipse and we want to find some module. Eclipse is going to download some huge index file from Maven Central in order to search in it. Why? There is a company which is very proud of making this Maven indexer a standard. So they are going to, we donated the Maven search index. Let's see how good is it. Well, we have to download huge files before we can search anything. And this file is updated rarely, usually once a day. So if we added a new module, we can't find it straight away up until tomorrow. And we need a special client in order to search. For example, we can search in Eclipse. So it's not very good bottom line. And yeah, so they made this donation, and thanks for the donation. They're not alone. There are other packaging systems which use downloadable indexes, like Debians and RPMs. They have a good excuse. They are old. They will go back to the times where actually the machines were big and slow. But modern systems like Nougat and RubyGems and many others are managed fine without Maven, without index download, and that's the lesson. The index should be on the server side, exposed in query API on real time. Lesson number 2 is about imposters. This guy is Heinrich Heine. It's actually a German poet which died a long time ago. Now let's go to the public key server, which should give unique identity based on the username, and we'll try to search for the mail of Heinrich Heine. Guess what? We have a lot of them. And it goes on. And we have here some smart guy that pretends to be Heinrich Heine, and we have Wolfgang Mozart that pretends to be Heinrich Heine. And it's all based on the keys, public keys, that actually supposed to identify a user. So I'm not sure that Heinrich Heine actually writes code. And we don't have that much of Heinrich Heine. So something is fishy. What's happened there? We have this tool that comes with a lot of Linux machines, which called the GPG gen key. It generates the key, and it has those instructions of what to do. In those instructions, the example is Heinrich Heine. So a lot of people just go and copy-paste the instructions inside the command. So we have a lot of Heinrich Heines. And we have a lot of packages inside these huge repositories which are identified by those public keys. So I don't know, Heinrich Heine wrote all those packages? I'm not sure about that. Lesson 2.5, this guy. This guy cut his ear off and died unappreciated because nobody gave him a credit. Lesson learned from those two: authenticate by public identity and give credit to the developer. You actually killed 2 birds with 1 stone. You both authenticate correctly, and you give the credit that should be given. So there are tools that do it right. Here is example. Nougat is a fine example. You look at the package at jQuery, and you actually see who is the owner on the package, and more so, who the author of the package is not meant to be the same guy, actually. Okay, now this is a plug, and it's going to be shameless. 30 seconds of shameless plug. This is JFrog's newest product. It's called Bintray. It manages modules, packages, binaries, whatever. And I believe we do it right in terms of giving the credit and authenticate the users. So here's Griffon, written by Almares. It's a very nice, groovy framework, UI framework. And yeah, we actually acknowledge the developer. This is who wrote it. And you can give him a lot of stars here, because this is a very cool stuff. So we have this binary repository. It currently supports Maven and RPM and Debian. You don't see the list here. And if there are Ruby guys in the crowd, you'll be happy to know that Ruby gems are coming really soon. So that's all for the shameless plug. Let's go to the next lesson. The next story is number 3. And imagine a typical Windows user. And the grandma wants to install some meme generator because she wants to generate some memes. So she goes with this Windows installer, and the installation goes to some directory which does not contain version. So if we install a module without specifying the version, so how can others depend on the module? When we are talking about end user software, that's okay. We don't care. But if it was a module with dependencies, how should it work? So actually, we do have those examples. This is the actual dependency of aptitude tool for Debian. And it depends on apt tool without version. So it goes to the operation system and say, hey, you have apt? Yeah, I have apt. Good, I'll depend on it. But where is the version? Okay, so I know you waited for it, and that's the time for a Borough Mirror. Here we go. One does not simply install multiple versions of, let's say, Ruby. So you have two problems. First of all, you may have two versions of Ruby installed and you can uninstall one without uninstalling another, or you have a hard time to install two different versions for your development process. So we have like different types of workarounds. For example, if you have these multiple versions in the system level, like RPMs, like Groovy, like Ruby that I mentioned earlier, you have some workarounds like Ruby Version Manager and Groovy Version Manager or Homebrew, etc., etc. If you go to the platform, being .NET platform or JVM platform, you have this ClassPass or DLL hell. So you have the transitive dependency conflicts. I'm going to mention it in a second. And you have some workarounds like the Uber jar or a static compilation in the C and .NET world. Let's do a little bit of fun interlude and go to the fine world of Maven. So you have this Maven conflict manager, and we have this package A version 1. It depends on a package E of version 1, and D of version 1, and B of version 1, which depends on C on version 1, and it depends on D on version 2. Woohoo! We have a conflict. So now we're going to play Who Wanna Be Millionaire. What's the correct answer? Which version of D ends up in the ClassPass? Who knows? Who thinks that it's A, D1? Who thinks that it's D, B, D2? You are not participating. Usually you will go with D2 because it's higher. So if you assume backwards compatibility, D2 sounds like a logical answer, but wrong answer. D1. Why? Because this is how the Maven conflict manager works. I won't explain you why, but it's a neat stuff. Okay, so now let's go back from the interlude back to the Borough Mirror game. One does simply uninstall module in. This is actually another aspect of the same problem of not having versions listed correctly. You don't have any way to uninstall a package. So we have this nice tool. I won't name any names because I really love this tool and I don't want to go bad on it. And it installed some artifacts. We have some file store with until-r version 277, and then in another directory we have again until-r version 277, and then in the third directory we go again in until-r version 277. So we have three locations of the file on the file system. We don't know which of them is actually dependency for our project. Maybe another jar is dependency to another project. It's probably very smart stuff, and I know it is a smart stuff because our chief architect wrote it. But the problem is, you cannot uninstall it. You don't know what to kill if you want to remove until R277. You just don't have this API. And this is another lesson that we learned, should provide us isolation on the version level and easy uninstall. Next one is story number 4, and we are going to talk about version ranges. When you can go and say, okay, everything which is higher than version 3 works for me. That's fine. Now, this is a very nice thing to say when you are really naive. This version, everything is above 3 works, means that you assume backwards compatibility. Not always there. So, stuff suddenly stops working because some library just rolled out a new version, and your old code stopped working anymore because now you transparently dependent on a new version without upgrading it explicitly, and it breaks backwards compatibility. You're doomed. So again, require explicit dependency versions, and then you will be in the state in the solid state. Next one, like vodka and beer. Configuration and metadata just won't mix. So here's an example. This is Spring Source GitHub repository. Okay. And it has a configuration, which are sources. They build with Gradle, do the right thing, and they have this build Gradle file, which is configuration. On the other side, they have this metadata, which are artifacts. They are stored together with the jar files and describe those jar files. This is metadata. And this is Artifactory, by the way, right? Okay, so there are different things. There are tools which mix them together, namely Maven again. What happens when configuration and metadata are mixed? So a user had a project, and it was a very nice one, my project A1. And the user defined very strict policy in its configuration that said, I only use my own very trusted and good repository. And now it has a dependency. The dependency is taken from the right place. But this dependency mixes configuration and metadata. Inside this dependency, we will find a definition of another repo. Definition of a repo is not a metadata, it's configuration. When it mixed inside the dependency itself, bad things happen. What's actually now happened is that this definition of a bad repository mixed with the definition of the good repository, and the good repository is shortcutted now when some other dependency is needed. The user won't be happy. So guys, don't mix configuration and metadata. You can mix vodka and beer naturally. Okay, so we already have an answer, and the answer is using the right tools for the job. It includes the right build tools, and includes the right CI servers. It includes naturally right binary repository, etc. We just need to find those tools and to use them and not use the bad ones. So that's all about the stories. One more thing. Doc Brown predicts even more usage of modules in the future. And why so? Why more usage? Because now we have this awesome cloud. And when we develop software for the cloud, we actually distribute plugins. It's very, very easy. You can go in any modern application, and you will find that it is pluggable, and its plugin repository is somewhere in the cloud. Right, so you can go with Node.js, they have this plugin framework. You can look at Ruby, they have their own plugin framework. You can look at Griffon that I mentioned earlier, it has its own plugin repo. So, if you are going to invent your own plugin repo, be careful. If you want to use one of the existing ones, do the right stuff. And actually, it was 125 slides now.